Being the second of two parts, this video discusses the fields of operation in practical magic. While the former deals with theory and techniques, this one shares thoughts and suggestions based on personal reflections on using the model in my practice. So if you haven't already, it would be reasonable to start with part 1 first and then proceed with this. As mentioned in the previous video, the purpose of this content isn't to tell anyone what to do or claim one approach is right whereas others is wrong. Instead, it is to help others find what works best for them. Banishing Field. According to most books, each operation should start end-to-end with a Banishing Field. The first creates a clear space which the invoked forces can fill without interference. The second is to purify the temple after, ensuring no astral leftovers are hanging in it. Such an approach is influenced by the more traditional Golden Dawn method of invoking and banishing a specific force in what they like to think of as a pyramid fashion, and you can learn more about that in virtually any book on Golden Dawn magic. Comment. As hinted at in the previous video, I encountered several downsides to using such an approach. The first is that while eliminating all influences, following LBRP with an LBRH remains a boundary between micro and macrocosm, making influencing the physical world extra difficult. Meaning, you isolate the force you're invoking in a stereo environment without interacting with or engaging the objective reality. Are preliminary banishings essential? Some traditional Golden Dawners consider preliminary banishings essential only when you're not in your sacred space and or your temple is also used by other people for other stuff. Examples are temples used by multiple groups and or for different purposes. If that isn't the case, then the Invoking and Operant fields seem more reasonable. Banishing your work. A risk scholars including Scott Stanwyck note is that frequently banishing the macrocosm or the objective might as well banish all the fortune and luck you're born with. I believe this makes pretty solid sense if we admit that luck is, if not entirely, at least primarily the high probability or likelihood of things going your way, particularly in the objective. Is closing with a banishing field necessary? It is said that not banishing after working might negatively affect your psyche, especially if you use planetary or sephirotic energy and or include something like SIRP. Slightly deviating from that, some people argue that this is only necessary if you want to have a purely mystical experience by meditating for a period with the invoked force and then banishing after. I found that using LBRH after working might not be most optimal since it banishes the created thought form and kinda cripples the operation, vastly mitigating the effects and making the result difficult to manifest. Also, that closing only with a license to depart, declaring the temple is closed and the Kabbalistic cross to anchor/seal the energy to my consciousness is far superior regarding proactively building things in my life. Personal experience. Besides that, my most profound experiences weren't while meditating in a circle and waiting for something to kick in after an invocation which I eventually banished. Usually they occur while actively doing things in my life after invoking a particular current without banishing after, letting the force influence as many of my activities as possible and obtaining insights during that process. I'll be very happy if you let me know what you think of that in the comments below. Invoking and Operant fields. Since having different results, different people prefer one over the other. The group of Scott Stanwyck, the scholar and author because of whom I started using the Operant model, dramatically improving the efficiency of my workings, report they get the best results when using the Operant field. While I definitely recognize the Operant field's potency and versatility and actually use it frequently, I cannot agree that it gives me the absolute best results exerting maximum power, so I see it as the second best in terms of practicality. Since he gave me the idea for this and the previous post, I cannot skip mentioning my loyal subscriber Kid Crook. After testing and trying, Crook shared that none of the others produces the kind of impact the Invoking field does. I'll be happy if you let me know whether any of you guys get similar results, and if so, in what manner. LIRP. This is why I see LIRP as very underrated compared to its counterpart. It doesn't remove, but it brings you into the magic along with LIRH's macrocosmic probability shift and the force you invoke next. LBRP purifies your inner being, but I wouldn't say LIRP does the opposite. It consecrates your magic, Plus, not all people experience psychological tension all the time, even if they have traumas and other conditions. Reconciliation. As displayed in the Tree of Life, one of the fundamental aims of Western magic is the reconciliation of opposites, the war with the higher self, micro and macrocosm, etc. In my humble opinion, by isolating the two latter, the Banishing Field kinda works against that. On the other hand, the Invoking empowers both, while opening each to the other so they can mingle and interlink. Apparently, this is why it is said that the Invoking Field merges the subjective and objective realities, allowing thought to become a reality more readily. Also, why scholars like Jeff Rhodes also refer to it as an empowering field. SIRP and OBW. Depending on who you ask, SIRP or OBW are either redundant or should replace your Operant or Invoking field following an opening banishing. On the other hand, I found that these are not the only two options available, hence I've been successfully stacking Invoking and Operant fields with SIRP inspired by different sources and scholars. I'd also like to know whether you've implemented a similar approach and how it does work for you. Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to know how to do SIRP, I strongly suggest my video on it. It really covers the right in great detail. Reasons to add SIRP. So how exactly adding an SIRP to an Invoking field enhances an operation? Primarily based on personal experience, the way I feel about it is this. The Invoking field opens the inner and outer worlds to each other, giving higher probability shift while empowering your being. SIRP lets that have a more immediate and direct impact on the physical reality by opening the elemental universes. In more slang terms, I'd say that it puts the operation on steroids, especially if you also engage the tablets, which are now available on my Etsy store for digital download. It is said that elemental magic manifests very fast, whereas planetary might take days to kick in. I wouldn't agree with that entirely when stacking an Invoking field with SIRP. In such cases, I believe the magic works much faster, making me highly accountable for taking massive action and doing my part as best as possible. You can find more about the importance of the latter in the works of Damon Brandt. Nature and vacuum. A danger some practitioners ignore is that doing excess banishings creates a vacuum. As we know, nature hates vacuum, filling it with whatever finds most readily available. According to scholars like Mark Stavish, that includes orchestrating your life by filling the emptiness however it finds suitable. And for me, that turns out to be passivity, apathy, and unimaginable introversion. Personal experience. Besides not getting the desired practical results, I noticed becoming quite isolated and quote-unquote capsulated when using the Banishing field extensively. As mentioned in my LIRP video, my whole life felt like it was put on hold or pause, lacking interactions, events and excitement. I also found myself distant and passive in activities I enjoy thoroughly, such as in my overall strive, motivation and initiative. Personality types. It is worth mentioning I'm an introvert. I'm also pretty great at banishing bad stuff from my life, and I did it with multiple substance addictions, unhealthy habits and toxic people. I really don't need magic for that, and I'm naturally great at it. Although it has its advantages, the biggest downside of such a tendency is that it can isolate me from the world, which I found that the Banishing field severely amplifies while keeping me and everything around me on pause or hold. On the contrary, doing magic in the Operant and Invoking fields does not just give me higher probability shifts, it also makes me acknowledge the good and the bad from the past, giving it the meaning that best serves my future and moving on with my life. I also feel way more present and grounded when using Operant and Invoking magic. Wicca and Cleaning. What I found is that for me, cleaning and ordering my space as neatly as possible, such as taking cold showers before each practice, is just as excellent, if not even superior for doing just that. Plus, cold showers stimulate the central nervous system, making you more mindful and present without jitters. Reasons for banishing. That, however, is different from saying I'd never use LBRP or a Banishing field. The first is how I exclusively start my operations in the rare cases after meeting with a jerk or feeling heavy or agitated. Actually, I find LBRP indispensable for bringing inner peace after dealing with such people. As mentioned in the previous video, you can think of Banishing as a sanitizer. It's great to use it if you just finished dealing with garbage, but if you start putting it on your skin way too often, even when clean, you might get rashes or something worse. Besides that, I mainly use the Banishing field after experimenting with a technique to amp up its effects, but succeeded only partially. It never disappoints in normalizing everything rapidly. Too many invocations. There's the argument that doing too many invocations will eventually catch up with you and you will have to deal with it. Now, let us consider you are invoking particular energies, having multiple spells running to bring specific results and or characteristics in you. Let us also suppose you always do things according to correspondences and, most important, consciously deliver a precise charge of intent, such as a license to depart after. What if all those energies stack up and the magic actually works? Whatever your thoughts, I'll be happy to know them in the comments below. Stories and urban legends. Anyone in fitness knows the story about someone who ate meager calories, did frequent rigorous exercise and never got shredded. Similarly, most of the people in self-help likely know a person who buys all the books and programs and visits all the seminars without making any progress. Very common, I think such stories aren't just urban legends, but actually create stereotypes. In Magick, there is the story of the person who practiced for 10 to 20 years without any results. Frustrated and angry at the work, they went to a local temple arguing that magic doesn't work and instead is a bunch of stony baloney. After listening to their story, one of the hierophants asked about their practice. The person responded that if not entirely, they did banishings primarily. Then the hierophant advised the seeker to swap out all their banishings for invocations. A month went by and then that person returned to the temple. This time they shared that their whole life changed, improving significantly. Final words. Sharing my 2 cents on the subject, this wraps up the second part of my video on the fields of operation in practical magic. I'll be happy to learn about your thoughts and experiences with the cover techniques and suggestions. Inspired by your feedback, I also created a downloadable cheat sheet which I put on Etsy with some elemental tablets like those shown in the video and others with flashing crosses. If not yet, the store will be open soon and I plan to upload more prints to help improve your magic and life. Other than that, let me know what kinds of videos you'd like to see on this channel. Also, whether you enjoy this production quality, consider checking my books and other channels if you're into product reviews and or healthy living and natural bodybuilding. Also, note that you can check my music on Spotify and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for your time.